on the birds, many of those groups of insects, particularly things like sawfly caterpillars or some of the aphids, which farmers may not like, but they are good chick food for common birds. Those have declined and find a nice home, whereas other species or other taxa have increased. So it's a bit of, and actually one of those groups that's increased on the study area are moths that are found in cereal fields. Not a normal place one might think for many moths, but they do have them in cereal fields, and those have actually increased in number.
What about sort of beneficial predators, things like ground beetles, ladybirds, things like that? So, have you seen a decrease or an increase in that?
Unfortunately, in cereal fields, mainly decreases, particularly in ground beetles. Those declined very much so in the early years of the study area. So that would have been the 1970s and the 1980s. It might be affected slightly by the way we monitor. So we monitor using a big Hoover-like attachment, and we go into the fields and take samples that way. And we tend to sample the small contaminants. So it'll be the small ground beetles. Those have definitely declined, and declined quite significantly. In terms of the farmers, they've lost some of the integrated pest management of the ground beetles, but there has been a decline in the number of cases.
I know that you've seen a reduction in the use of insecticides over those 50 years.
That's a good question. What's happened is there was an increase in insecticides through the 70s and into the 80s and early 90s. Then it plateaued, and then it's declined recently quite a bit. And that's in regard to the fact that the farmers are realizing they don't need to use spring or summer insecticides. So they're not really treating for aphids in the spring or in the summer, and that is where we get that decline in insecticide use. In some cases, that might have been the reason why we have some of those increases in moths, but we're not sure.
Anyway, thanks for those the year's worth of material to be looking at. I know that you haven't yet analysed data for 2024, but have you seen any indication that things are improving?
Well, it's not a very intriguing year with insect numbers. So the analysis that we do kind of smooths that out over those 50 years. So last year was pretty good, actually, if you look at the raw numbers. But this year we're a little bit worried about the fact that it appears that the development of the insects that we've been collecting this year is slightly delayed.
Dr. Julie Ewald from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. Now, we are talking about plant nurseries here this week, and they come in sizes. Wild flower nursery on Friday, and today it's trees. You might think that there is nothing more environmentally friendly than growing trees, but Tree Nursery 5 has been working hard to become even greener, carbon negative no less. Richard Baines has been to see how we do it.
We are coming up the hill to the Harding Oak area. You feel the wind hit you just as you get to the top.
Here at the April Tree Nursery near Kilcuddy, the elements are used to make sure the trees are tough enough for the sometimes harsh Scottish climate.
That's really good for the trees because that means that they're getting full exposure to the elements. It means they're hardening up, being fine, and they're ready for when they get planted out in the hill.
Rennick Drysdale is managing director of Ranger, but perhaps appropriately on a former coordinator.
There's these little white pyramids. The nearest one is soil moisture. The one beyond that is CO2 humidity. And then the one beyond that that's got H is temperature, humidity, and wet bulb.
This huge climate-controlled greenhouse is the starting point for millions of trees and the heart of the acre operation. The high-tech system uses only sunlight and ventilation to control the greenhouse conditions.
They give us all the data for the environment inside, including the ones on the right, those little blue ones which do photosynthetically active radiation, light that's useful to plants.
Acres carbon output, as initially evaluated by the government body Zero Waste Stock, was about 340 tonnes. Measures such as the high-tech greenhouse, using renewable energy, and using much smaller tubs of growing medium to cut waste, have allowed it to make a huge cut in that. But it wasn't quite enough.
You can't really get to zero. So what we did was we then purchased biodiverse woodland carbon credits to offset the unavoidable emissions associated with our operations. And that's how we're able to say that we're very carbon negative.
And it's good for business as well as the environment.
My name is Mark O'Neill, Operations Director at Acre. lot of customers, potential customers, university groups, government bodies, and they like it. And they can clearly see themselves, our trees, their size, their development. We can grow as equally as good trees being carbon negative. That's open.
My name is David Farrow and I'm the Senior Project Manager for ACON. It encourages customers to come to us because obviously it further drives our goal towards carbon negativity if they can see that the trees that they produce is already seen.
Surprisingly, most oil plantations still contain non-renewable carbon-reducing peat.
For peat reduced, the alternative is cocoa coir that's imported from Brazil, from palm plantations in former rainforest, and we're told that that's more sustainable than peat for this process. In our opinion, it's not. If you were to grow 100 trees in peat, you might get 80 back. If you were to grow 100 trees in cocoa coir, you probably would get 40 back. So you'd have a lot more waste if you shift to cocoa coir.
But that too is going to change. The firm will soon have to find an alternative.
We've got till 2026 to try and become peat free because the government has put legislation in place that suggests that all of us will have to phase out peat use in growing facilities. So we're trying to figure that out. There's a lot of good people working on it. We've got a couple of years to try and crack it.
That report from Richard Baines. The National Audit Office published a stack of value for money reports yesterday, 13 in total, delayed by the general election. It may have seen coverage about the one on HS2, but as you can guess, it's their report into the government's farming and countryside programme that we have been avidly reading through. Now, obviously, this report covers the actions of DEFRA under the last government, but it provides a useful picture of what's been working and isn't and what's improved. Juliet McElveen is a professor of practice at the University of Cumbria. She's worked with many farmers in plantation land and has been a frequent commentator on land policy. We've been discussing the report, and we started with its observations on farmer confidence.
It's a really timely report and very useful for the new ministers coming in terms of progress that we can only really move suggests that farmers are confident about the future. And I know from my work with commoners, my work with upland farmers, that they're feeling very much at risk. They're not confident about the future. There are huge challenges, as we know, with the weather, but also with their direct payments, the basic payments have been halved. And many of these farmers they're in the old schemes, in the old high-level stewardship schemes. And one of the really interesting points the National Audit Office emphasises is that the amount of money has gone down in value. So even just between 2020 and 2023, the value of payments went down by 12%. If we look at the higher level stewardship payments, they haven't increased since 2006. So if you're a moorland farmer, your payment for restoring moorland hasn't increased since 2006. So we're not going to have thriving farming businesses until we have payments that really reward farmers for delivering for society. So we get that right balance between food production, environmental outcomes, and climate resilience.
Julia Agamben. And the new farming minister, Daniel Zeichenth, commenting on it, says the new government is working to restore stability and confidence of farmers. And I quote, that is why we will not be overturning the apple cart. We are fully committed to the environmental and management skills. Join Charlotte and the team at the Royal Welsh Show in Built Wells tomorrow, but that's it for us for this morning. Producer is Al Beach. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.
Since 1974, I've been exploring the lives of visually impaired people on Radio 4's In Touch. It's shown me there's little blind people won't have a go at.
Considerably at risk. I mean, you're the person in the end of the horse.
But how have changes in society affected the lives of blind and partially sighted people? And what will the next 50 have in store?
If the technology isn't working out, then the technology has to be made to work better.
50/50 Vision with me, Peter White. This Sunday night at 7:15 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
And this is BBC Radio 4.
It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th of July. Morning, this is Today with Emma Barnett. Just impact main headline this morning. A soldier has been treated for serious injuries after being stabbed while in uniform near a barracks in Kent. Minister Keir Starmer has suspended 7 Labour backbenchers who rebelled on a vote on the two-child benefit cap. We're going to hear from one of the suspended MPs. And James Cleverly has become the first Conservative MP to declare he will run for the leadership of his party.
Yes, and good morning from me. Yesterday, a senior police officer told us violence against women and girls was a national emergency and that young men were being radicalised online.
The level of harmful content, just in particular around serious pornography, that young people are exposed to, and not having that adult regulation to understand what they're seeing and then deal with.
How big, how new is the problem, and how are teenage girls' lives being shaped by this online misogyny? We'll go through some of them in today's program. Welcome back. And as Andy Murray confirms the Paris Olympics will be his final tournament, the writer Simon Barnes pays tribute to a British great.
He was notoriously British when he won and Scottish when he lost. He was the first British male to win a Wimbledon singles title for 77 years. How about that?
Extraordinary, worth reflecting. But first, let's get the BBC News read this morning by Alan Smith.
A soldier has been seriously injured after being stabbed in broad daylight while walking in uniform near an army barracks in Kent. He was attacked in the street in Chatham yesterday afternoon. A 24-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Aruna Iyengar reports.
In a statement, an army spokesman confirmed that a soldier in his 40s was stabbed near his home in Chatham late yesterday afternoon. The BBC was told the soldier was wearing his uniform at the time. He was airlifted to hospital. The attack happened near Brompton Barracks, the headquarters of the Royal School of Military Engineering. A police cordon is in place at the scene and investigations are continuing. The army said it was working closely with Kent Police. It has urged anyone who witnessed the attack to come forward and has asked people to respect the privacy of the victim's family.
Sir Keir Starmer will face a grilling in his first Prime Minister's Questions this It's lunchtime, a day after he suspended 7 Labour MPs for rebelling against the government. They voted for an SNP amendment to scrap the 2-child benefit cap that prevents almost all parents from claiming universal credit for more than 2 children. The Prime Minister has previously said it's unaffordable to ditch the policy, but many within his party disagree. He'll change his position in the coming months. Here's our political correspondent Nick Eardley.
After less than 3 weeks in Downing Street, this is Sir Keir Starmer's first rebellion. A small revolt, but one that's been met with ruthless discipline. The 7 MPs who defied the government and voted to scrap the 2-child benefit cap have been suspended from the party for 6 months. Among them, prominent MPs from the left, including the former Shuttle Chancellor, John McDonnell, and Rebecca Long-Bailey, who challenged Sir Keir for the leadership in 2020. Although the Prime Minister has a thumping majority in the Commons, which makes it unlikely he'll lose a vote anytime soon, last night's suspensions are a warning to others that defiance on key issues will not be allowed. There are, however, many other Labour MPs who want the government to remove the 2-child benefit cap. Some are hopeful that a change might come down the line.
Around 55 Vietnamese asylum seekers are being sent back to the country today under a returns agreement. It's understood the Home Office is using a plane which had been due to fly migrants to Rwanda under the Conservative government's deportation scheme, which has now been scrapped. Nearly a fifth of those arriving in the UK in small boats in the first 3 months of this year were Vietnamese, the largest number of any nationality. Hundreds of Jewish activists calling for a ceasefire in Gaza have been arrested after staging a protest inside the US Capitol ahead of a visit by the Israeli Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu will address Congress this afternoon as he seeks to shore up American support for his military offensive at a time of tension between the two allies. He will also hold talks with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump. Lawyers are preparing a lawsuit against the owners of large blocks of flats over what are alleged to be rip-off charges. These fees include hidden commission on buildings insurance, as Michael Buchanan reports.
Buildings insurance on large blocks of flats in England and Wales is usually arranged by the freeholders, the owners of the building. The cost is then spread among the leaseholders, the owners of the individual flats. For many years, the total cost has, however, included commission the freeholder has received from the insurance company for buying the product, which was invariably not declared. The Residential Freehold Association said commissions were justified, as many freeholders carried out work on behalf of insurance companies, such as processing claims.
The Welsh Health Secretary, Eluned Morgan, is expected to be confirmed as the new Welsh Labour leader later today, paving the way for her to become the next First Minister. No other Senedd member has put their name forward to contest the role. The nomination is due to close at midday. New figures show that the number of people in the UK mainly using cash for day-to-day spending has risen to its highest level in 4 years. A report by the trade organisation UK Finance said the increase reflected cost of living pressures, with some people preferring to budget with notes and coins. But it's also found that nearly 40% of adults were living largely cashless lives. And the actress Roberta Taylor has died at the age of 76. She was best known for playing the straight-talking, chain-smoking Inspector Gina Gold in The Bill and the matriarch Irene Raymond in EastEnders. Speaking to the BBC in 2000, she reflected on that time on the soap.
My first day on EastEnders came as a complete surprise because I should have started 3 weeks later. So I hadn't got my head together at all, but I'd done all the work. I was fine about it until I arrived. And it is so scary. I couldn't even begin to imagine the kind of high profiles of EastEnders. Everyone told me your life will change.
Roberta Taylor, who's died at the age of 76.
In 6 minutes past 6. Let's get the weather, shall we? Go over to Stafford at the BBC Weather Centre. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Emma and Justin. Thank you very much. Weather's looking quite changeable for the next few days, but on the whole, we should see quite a lot of sunshine around for the rest of the week, and we'll feel increasingly warm as well, particularly across the more southern parts of the UK as we head into the weekend. Today, we're starting off on a fine note. We've got a couple of weak weather fronts pushing off the Atlantic and big increasing cloud and outbreaks of rain. So I'll start with England and Wales. It is a fine start for many. We'll see some good sunny spells around first thing this morning. Variable cloud here and there and very light winds. But cloud will build through the morning, especially for Wales and Western England, with some patchy rain arriving by around lunchtime. Heaviest of the rain will be across South Wales and South West England, and a
stay driest and brightest across more central and eastern areas today. The temperatures will range from 20 to maybe 25 or 26 degrees in the warmer spots across the eastern southeast of England. Scotland, Northern Ireland, it's a similar picture. It's a dry start with sunny spells this morning, maybe the odd shower, but it will turn cloudy across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland through the morning, with patchy rain moving in. Southwesterly breeze also picking up, particularly across Northern Ireland this afternoon as the rain starts to pepper up. Temperatures range from 18 to 21 degrees, so staying quite warm. Tonight it looks like outbreaks of rain across western areas will become increasingly localised and spread east across most places overnight, with some heavier bursts developing here and there. And it will be quite a warm and muggy night. Into tomorrow though, it looks like it will be cloudier, a little bit cooler, outbreaks of rain here and there. As we head into Friday and the weekend, apart from a few isolated showers, we'll see increasing amounts of sunshine and warm up in the southwest.
So thank you. 8 minutes past 6 is the time. Let's have a first look at the papers. Many of the front pages have pictures of the three-time Olympic dressage champion Charles Dujardin, who was pulled out of the Paris Games after the release of a video. The Daily Mail describes her as a Team GB Golden Girl. The Telegraph says she's alleged to have whipped a horse 24 times like an elephant in the circus and is deeply ashamed of her actions.
The Telegraph leads with a report that GPs are threatening to see fewer patients in a row over pay. It says family doctors in England are voting on whether to take part in national collective action, with work to rule measures set to be introduced from next week. The paper says that will result in GPs cutting the number of appointments they offer each day by up to a third.
Front page of the Times carries the headline, long-term sick should be forced to seek work. It quotes the government's health advisor, Alan Milburn. The paper says the former health secretary is urging fundamental reform to deal with the UK's welfare bill. Mr. Milburn is reported to have labelled the current system crazy. He says he found 7 out of 10 economically inactive people wanted to work, but few had any help or requirement to do so.
Moving over to The Sun, and the front page of that paper features a picture of the Islamist radical preacher Anjan Chowdhury, who's been convicted on terror charges and declares, now throw away the key. The Mail asks, why was the jihad preacher free to spout hate? He had been in prison before. The paper says the 57-year-old embarked on a global bid to recruit the next generation of clerics from Brazil, Canada and the US after being freed from jail in 2018. It says the police investigation revealed he'd also been peddling sermons to British school children as young as 14.
The Financial Times carries the headline, windfall profit, Crown Estate blows in £1 billion. It says a lucrative stretch of offshore wind farms around the coastlines of England, Wales and Northern Ireland sent profits of the monarchy's estate soaring. The Crown Estate, which plays a leading role in world finances, said earnings have more than doubled, largely due to fees charged to offshore wind farms.
And several papers, including the Daily Mirror, the Daily Express and the Metro, lead on the BBC's Director General's apology for allegations engulfing Strictly Come Dancing. In what it labels as an exclusive, the Mirror claims Strictly dancers fear they're being hung out to dry by former celebrity partners and don't believe they're being protected over the abuse claims. The paper says the professional dancers are calling on BBC bosses to vet new contestants before they start rigorous training for the dance show.
The Guardian pays tribute in an obituary to the actor Roberto Taylor, who died at the age of 76, best known for television for the role of the matriarch Anne Raymond in EastEnders, the hard-drinking and spirited Gina Golden-Bill. She also had a distinguished stage career. The paper says Roberto Taylor demonstrated triumphantly how a really good actor can encompass grand tragedy, high comedy, and superior soap opera without strain.
It's 11 minutes past 6. A British Army soldier is in hospital with serious injuries after being stabbed in Kent while in uniform. Aruna Yangar, our correspondent in Kent, close to the scene. What do we know, Aruna?
Yes, the soldier was a 40-year-old man. He's in a serious condition in hospital at the moment. He was airlifted to hospital last night after the stabbing took place at around 6 o'clock in the evening. A 24-year-old local man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The Ministry of Defence confirmed yesterday that the man who was attacked was a soldier. He was wearing uniform at the time of the attack near his home in Chatham in Sunnyport Gardens. Now this is close to Brompton Barracks, which is the headquarters of the Royal School of Military Engineering. I'm now in the area where the stabbing took place. There's a large police presence in the area as they continue their investigations. The Ministry of Defence have been at pains to ask people not to speculate on the motives behind this attack, because they say that would be unhelpful. They are asking people, though, if they have any information to contact Kent Police.
And in terms of the detail, we don't have anything yet on motive or anything else, or there's, any other details you can share at this moment?
No, we don't at this stage. We don't, and we obviously this happened in a military area, and the man was wearing, or the person who was stabbed was wearing a uniform. But we have no more information, and we've been asked really not to speculate on the reasons behind this attack. So at this stage, we can't give you any more information on that.
Well, thank you for all the latest on that. A British Army soldier in hospital with serious injuries after being stabbed in Kent while in uniform. 13 minutes past 6 at November. Thank you.
The US Vice President Kamala Harris has gone on the offensive against Donald Trump in the first rally of her White House campaign. She was portrayed in November's election as a choice between a former prosecutor, that is her, and a convicted felon, who is Donald Trump. David Willis is our US correspondent.
Her first campaign rally since Joe Biden stepped aside, of course, Justin, in the swing state of Wisconsin and the city in which the Republican Party held its convention last week, Milwaukee, coming after Kamala Harris had secured the support of sufficient Democratic delegates to effectively make her the de facto nominee. And we saw a rousing, punchy, passionate speech to the biggest audience of the Democratic campaign so far, in which Kamala Harris revealed her intention really to pursue very much the policies of Joe Biden in terms of bolstering America's middle class, curbing gun violence, boosting reproductive freedom. And she took aim at Donald Trump, repeating a line that she used yesterday in remarks to campaign workers in Delaware, saying that as a former public prosecutor, she'd taken on perpetrators of all kinds, predators, fraudsters, and cheaters. So hear me when I say I know Donald Trump's type. And once again, that line was met with cheers and applause.
Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington and meeting one-to-one with her, with Kamala Harris.
That's right, although she will be conspicuously absent during his address to a joint session of Congress later today, Justin. She is travelling to Indianapolis for a previously scheduled event. She's due to meet Mr. Netanyahu later in the week, although so far no date has been announced for that. She has, of course, never publicly contradicted Joe Biden on Israel, but she's been by far the loudest voice in his administration in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and expressing concern about civilian casualties there. For her, there's the danger of alienating a sizable group of Democratic voters who believe that her election might bring about a change in America's support for Israel. And of course, there are others in the party who are opposed to Israel's conduct in Gaza. So she will be under pressure to define her stance on an issue where there is quite considerable daylight between her and Joe Biden.
David Willis, thank you.
16 minutes past 6. Let's get the latest on business. The electric car maker Tesla has seen its profits tumble even more than expected. Sean Frankton, good morning.
Morning, Gemma.
Tell us a bit more.
Yes, I will. I will be interested to hear how Elon Musk might spin this one. Tesla now making less money on each car it makes, its profit margin, than it has done for 5 years. Investors not impressed as the share price fell 8% after the announcement. Rachel Winter is partner and investment manager at Killick & Co. Morning, Rachel. How unimpressed were you?
A little bit unimpressed, but Tesla has been quite a surprising company over the last couple of years. The shares have been very volatile. I think the company has been very good at managing investor expectations. Over the last year, the company has suffered a big increase in costs and expenses. That's the reason why the profit margin has come down so much. And as you say, the share price did not react well when the results came out last night.
So, what is different then from an investor perspective? What's not happening at Tesla that you thought would have been happening?
Well, they have delayed the announcement of their robo-taxis or their autonomous taxis. That is a disappointment. I think there is also now a lot more competition in the electric vehicle market than there has been previously, and that has forced Tesla to cut its prices in some markets, particularly China. So that really has weighed on the profit margin.
Right, interesting. And so that path, I see Elon Musk saying this morning, or at least after these results,
business, doesn't like it being called a car business. So we'll see if he manages to convince the likes of yourself in the long run that that's what it's all about. I wanted to ask you about Alphabet, the owners of Google. How's that getting on? Almost in comparison to what's occurring at Tesla, these huge tech companies dominating so much of our lives.
Yeah, so the results from Alphabet I found to be much more reassuring. The revenues were up from 74.6 billion in the first quarter to 84.7 billion in the second quarter, so a really nice increase there. The shares are up 50% over the last 12 months, so there was a lot of good news already priced into the shares. They were down about 2% in after-hours trading last night, but in the context of that 50% rise we'd already seen, that little drop last night is not very big in the grand scheme of things.
And actually, we're waking up to headlines this morning of Google attempting a huge takeover, be one of its biggest, Alphabet at least, attempting one of its biggest takeovers forever, I think, the largest ever acquisition it would be. It's had a $23 billion bid rejected for a cyber security business, an Israeli company called Wiz.
Yeah, so Google had made a claim for this company, but the bid has been rejected, and it does appear that Wiz believes it can achieve a higher valuation by undergoing its own IPO. So it looks as though Wiz is going to list on the stock exchange of its own accord. So that will be a disappointment to Google.
Interesting time to be attempting to buy a cybersecurity company after the outages last week. Rachel, thanks so much. Rachel Winter, partner and investment manager at Killick & Co, another big tech company that has been updating us. As Spotify has recorded another record profit for a 3-month period, just short of the £1 billion mark. It saw its share price jump almost 12% yesterday. Subscribers on the rise as well. Sir Robin Miller joins me, founder and creative director of Chrysalis Group. Morning, Sir Robin.
Morning, Sean.
What's working at Spotify right now that maybe the rest of the music industry is thinking we need to be doing more of that?
It's got its act together on two things. First of all, high resolution. In other words, when you used to listen to Spotify until recently, there was a limit to the amount of bandwidth that they could afford to hand out, and of course a limit to the amount of bandwidth that we had at home or on our smartphones. As those capacities get bigger, now we're able to experience music via streaming services at CD quality, or in some cases even better. And that may not seem to make a difference, sure, but actually for continuing this for long periods of time, it is better. The other thing, of course, that's happening is, as they will say, Spotify, the paid subscription is going up. You've always had the choice. You could listen to Spotify free as long as you were happy with ads every now and then. Now the trend, really a lot to do with, I think, YouTube, the rise of YouTube, music, and TikTok is that people don't want the ads, they're prepared to pay a small amount. And of course, the paid subscriptions, when they grow exponentially, are going to make them more money than fixed price advertising.
Does Spotify's branching out into podcasts, audiobooks in recent times, does that eat into the benefits that the music industry has seen from Spotify's success?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to, sure. If you're an investor in Spotify, I think you're very pleased because you're looking at market share, you're looking at the size of the marketplace. You probably know better than me. They've got something like 256 million paid subscribers. There has to be a ceiling now. So typically what a company will do, rather than scaling up, in other words, doing more of the same, they're scaling out, they're going off into different products. Now, it's mirrored. The answer to your question is it is actually mirrored. So my record business, we actively now look at podcasts in particular, but other ways of extracting sorts of interest and buy-in from fans. So I think it's quite natural and normal.
And so Robin, just finally, I wanted to change tack a bit and ask you about a story on the front page of the Times this morning. Both as you're boss of a business, music industry boss, founder and creative director of Chrysalis Group. You're also chairman of the disability charity Scope. When you see a headline like "long-term sick should be forced to seek work," and then you sort of see what it's all about. There's Alan Milburn, the former health secretary, Labour advisor, highlighting areas to get growth, and particularly highlighting that those who are long-term sick, as the Times puts it, must be required to look for jobs to deal with unsustainable welfare costs.
The problem is in the language. I'm not uncomfortable with the concept that long-term sick, I mean, I'm long-term sick, I've been blind for 40 years, sure. I'm not unhappy with the idea that there should be encouragement to actually, even people who have been out of work for a long time, with perhaps a long-term condition, epilepsy, for instance, are encouraged, and the employers are encouraged to create a landscape where they can thrive and prosper. What I am very unhappy about is it brings back dark memories of me going down to the labour exchange and saying, you know, I'm blind, can you give me a job? And then they say, well, no, we're not any jobs for blind people. That's interesting. Well, in that case, can I have some benefits? And they said, well, you'll have to prove that you're blind. I mean, I literally sat in an office and said, would you like me to walk to the end of the room and just bump into the wall at the other end? So a lot of people with disabilities and long-term sickness have had some gruesome experiences of being, quotes, encouraged back to work or discouraged for claiming sickness benefit. But I'm not against the idea that making people who have felt that they are too sick to work or too disabled to work, to encourage them, provided when they're encouraged to go and seek work, Sean, that there is a slightly better climate in the work environment, that companies themselves realise that by creating safe spaces, which they did so successfully a generation ago, single mums couldn't get work, now they can. They had to create creches and maternity cover. They need to do little things to say, you may be sick, you may have certain physical needs, we can accommodate you.
Sir Robin Miller, thank you so much. One for us to discuss at a greater length another time, I'm sure. Sir Robin Miller, creative director of Chrysalis Group and chairman of the disability charity Scope. Now, house building, as if we needed more data of the side of the challenge, the National House Building Council showed the number of houses registered to be built in recent months fell by almost a quarter compared to last year. We would need double the volumes of homes being built than we're at right now to reach the Labour Party's target of 1.5 million homes to be built over the next 5 years. Nigel Hugan is Chief Executive of Urban and Civic, also Chairman of the think tank Centre for Cities, done a big deal in recent days to acquire a huge amount of land to be developing. Nigel, morning.
Morning, Sean. Thank you, Pat.
No, thank you. Labour have also talked about new towns of the future being a part of that. How is that going to be pulled off? I see that, you know, in your portfolio, you could be potentially involved in some of that.
Yes, new towns are at the top end, if you like, of large, new, in most cases, urban extensions. And it's a key part of the new government's philosophy that in order to get numbers up, you have to have it what they describe as infrastructure first development. And that's very much what we've been doing for the last 10 years. We've been slightly ploughing a single furrow, honestly, but it comes from a conviction that you simply can't hit housing numbers in southeast England without a greater involvement of big sites. And if you're going to do those big sites, and new towns are the biggest of all sites, you have to do that by putting in the infrastructure before you build the houses.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, but are you convinced the money and the commitment for that infrastructure is also there alongside the hopes for 1.5 million homes?
Well, we shall have to see. I mean, in relation to new towns, that's definitely a scale above that which we operate at the moment. But the biggest of our projects presently is probably around 10,000 houses. So that would be a pretty substantive new village in most people's terms. So, and we've been able to do that with loans from the government, but without any grant. And when it comes to new towns, of course, there's going to be further capital asks of that. But the experience of new towns historically, and of course we haven't built any since Milton Keynes was one of the last in 1967. The experience of those was that they borrowed money in first instance, but they did pay it back actually rather cool.
Nigel Hugill, thank you so much for taking the time this morning, Chief Executive of Urban and Civic, also Chairman of the think tank Centre for Cities.
Short thanks, 27 minutes past 6 to the Sport and Rock.
Morning, Justin. Well, the world of equestrian sport is now having to deal with the emergence of a video allegedly showing three-time Olympic gold medalist Charlotte Dujardin whipping a horse, quote, like an elephant in a circus. That specific detail comes from the lawyer representing the complainant in the case, which originates from an incident which it's alleged took place several years ago. 39-year-old Dujardin has withdrawn from the British team for the Paris Olympics, saying the video showed her, and I quote, making an error of judgment. But she's also been provisionally suspended by the FEI, the International Equestrian Federation. It announced that it had received footage showing that Dujardin had engaged in conduct contrary to the principles of horse welfare during a training session conducted at Ms. Dujardin's private stable. Here's our sports correspondent, Laura Scott.
At an event like the Olympics, equestrian sport is celebrated, but this is going to raise some really uncomfortable questions for everyone involved in equestrian sport. And remember, the eventing at the Olympics starts just this weekend, so some really uncomfortable moments, a gaping hole in Team GB, and this is a major story that has really rocked British sport.
A big win for the men of defending champions, the Oval Invincibles, against Birmingham Phoenix, as cricket's the 100 competition entered its fourth season at the Oval. Phoenix lost all 10 wickets for just 89 runs. Invincibles knocked off the runs for the loss of just 2 wickets with 31 balls to spare. Invincibles captain Sam Billings top scored with 31.
Probably wasn't pretty at times, but just to get the job done, really pleasing. First game of the year, probably a few nerves from everyone, getting back into the tournament, getting back into this format of the game, so really good stuff.
There was a win also for the Invincibles women by 45 runs, half centuries for Alice Capsey and Paige Schofield. The top European football leagues, including the Premier League and Global Players Union FIFPro, are to launch legal action against the world governing body FIFA for what they describe as its abuse of dominance in the game. This amounts to a complaint to the European Commission by some 39 leagues from 33 countries, with FIFPro saying that the international calendar is now beyond saturation and a risk for the health of players, alleging that FIFA's decisions over the last years have repeatedly favoured its own competitions and commercial interests. FIFA has countered with its own statement, accusing some leagues of hypocrisy by sending their players on global pre-season tours. Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool and Chelsea are all in the USA at the moment for lucrative pre-season friendlies.
Rob, thank you. This morning, Radio 4 has a new investigation from Jane Sawley.
Police in the London area have started a massive hunt for the wife of the deputy chairman of the News of the World.
In December 1969, Muriel Mackay vanished from her London home.
We had your wife. It would cost you £1 million to get her back.
2 men targeting Rupert Murdoch's wife had abducted Muriel by mistake.
The Mackay case introduced all the perfect elements of a newspaper story.
Now we investigate the crime that still haunts Muriel's family to this day.
I just want to find my mother's body.
Worse Than Murder, with me, Jane McSorley, on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Starts this morning at 9:30.
So now it's 29 minutes to 7. You are listening to Today on Radio 4. Democrat Justin and Alan Smith has a summary.
A 24-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a soldier was stabbed near a barracks in Kent. It's understood the victim, who's in his 40s, was in uniform at the time of the attack in Chatham. Sir Keir Starmer will face a grilling at his first Prime Minister's Questions this lunchtime, a day after he suspended 7 Labour MPs for voting against the government on an amendment to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. They backed an SNP motion calling for an end to the policy, which prevents almost all parents from claiming universal credit for more than 2 children. The motion was defeated. Hundreds of Jewish activists from around the United States have staged a protest inside the US Capitol building, saying they oppose a visit to Washington by the Israeli Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu is seeking to shore up American support for his military offensive at a time of tension between the two allies. A public inquiry in New Zealand has found that 200,000 children, young people and vulnerable adults have been abused in state and religious care since 1950. It found that those from the indigenous Maori community and people with disabilities were particularly affected. The inquiry spoke to victims of rape, sterilisation and electric shocks. But the country's Prime Minister described it as a dark and sorrowful day in New Zealand's history. The Welsh Health Secretary, Eluned Morgan, is expected to be confirmed as the new Welsh Labour leader later today, paving the way for her to become the next First Minister. No other Senedd member has put their name forward to contest the role, with nominations due to close at midday. And John Mayall, a pioneering figure in the British blues scene, has died at his home in California at the age of 90. In the 1960s, his influential band, the Blues Breakers, helped launch the careers of rock stars including Eric Clapton, Johnny B, Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac, and Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones.
Thank you. It is 27 minutes to 7. A rebellion in the Commons and a reaction from Keir Starmer. The issue, of course, two-child cap on benefits. Henry Zeppelin, our chief political correspondent. Quite a palaver, Henry, and to an extent, I suppose, an unexpected one, or was it? Did the rebels expect to be suspended when they...
Towards the end of the hours of persuasion from the government whips, I think this threat was made. I'm not sure whether the rebel MPs believed it, but clearly they decided to rebel in the knowledge that the threat had been made, and it was followed through. I mean, it is an interesting decision for Keir Starmer to have made so early in his government, although his people would say, well, that's in response to the decision made to rebel on a vote so early in his government, not just any vote, a vote on this new government's legislative programme. I think if Keir Starmer had a majority of more typical size, maybe a much smaller majority than the one that he's had, you would say, well, yes, this is firm, ruthless action, but on the other hand, he might be storing up trouble in Parliament. He may find that goodwill isn't there from his MPs when he needs it in the coming years. I'm not sure that is the case with his colossal majority, so much of it made up of new MPs who are very supportive of the direction in which he's taking the Labour Party, several of whom I spoke to who do want the two-child benefit cap to go in time, but were very frustrated at the noise being made by MPs on the left of the party. But if Keir Starmer is storing up a challenge here, I think it might be more outside Parliament. Labour's vast victory in Parliament at the general election nevertheless showed that there are parts of their coalition where their vote is fraying slightly, where there is a challenge particularly from the left, and that is something perhaps that could be inflamed by this decision. But in the meantime, Keir Starmer could suspend many more MPs if he wanted to, but barely touch the sides.
It's an interesting point about outside Parliament. I will be talking about breaking Mick Whelan, the General Secretary, and as their continuous support this time about that. Meanwhile, James Cleverly, standing for the leadership of the Conservative Party, first into the race. Is it going to hurt?
Certainly. I think he's a strong candidate. He's been Foreign Secretary and Home Secretary, two of the great offices of state, and he's not massively factional or ideological, and in leadership elections that's often a strength. We will know come Monday a list from whom one of them will be the next leader of the Conservative Party. I think there's about 8 Conservatives currently canvassing support from their colleagues. Mathematically, they're not all going to make it onto the threshold for Monday. They need to support 10 MPs, and there's only 121 Conservative
teams from the police, from the intelligence service, from the border force to try to go after the people smuggling. So the issue there, though, is that's a long-term project that involves lots of international cooperation. And the reality is, this is such a nuclear chain of human misery that if you take out one gang, another is quick to pop up when person's trying to get down the game and whack-a-mole. One thing the government is trying to do in the shorter term is remove the people who don't have the right to be here. And today they're telling us they're planning to remove 55 people from Vietnam, send them back there, using a plane that wasn't on here. This will remove people from around. But this is certainly a long-term project with no easy fixes.
Simon James.
It is 21 minutes to 7. There's to be a new First Minister in Wales confirmed today. Our Griffiths and Wales correspondent is on the line. Who is it?
Good morning. Well, Eluned Morgan, who we should refer to as Baroness Eluned Morgan, because she's a life peer as well, is likely to be confirmed as the new Welsh Labour leader, and that in time will pave the way for the next First Minister of Wales. There's some procedure to go through before then, so whether that happens in the next week or so, it will take a recall of the Welsh Parliament, may possibly even take till September, but I doubt she wants to hang on.
Gosh, and tell us about her. What difference will she make to people in Wales?
Well, she's known at the moment as the Health Secretary, Secretary of Energy, which is struggling with rapid engagement and missing performance targets, so she's had the hardest brief, arguably, under Welsh Labour, but she's been a familiar face in Welsh Labour circles for a long time. She was the youngest ever MEP elected way back in 1994 at the age of 27, and she served in Brussels and Strasbourg before going to the Lords as a life peer back in 2011, then came to the Senate in the 2016 election. So she's a familiar face.
Yeah, a familiar face, and as you say, in a very difficult brief. But I just wonder, I mean, it's a serious question. Does the fact of her arrival now, I'm assuming she does get there after all the various hoops are jumped through, does the fact of her arrival really make any difference to anyone actually? What does it do? What will she do that's different?
Well, she'll put an end to the very public rift that's been at the top of Welsh Labour, and therefore the top of the Welsh Government, with Vaughan Gething standing down, cabinet ministers resigning in protest against him. How much it will change on delivery is a very good question, because she's been in that cabinet for several years. She has made some of the decisions that affect public services and that aren't really changing and improving the performance of those public services, such as the NHS. She doesn't have massive public recognition, certainly not on the scale that someone like Mark Drakeford enjoyed, albeit that was largely down to the pandemic. So in terms of policy changes, we don't really know, because she's not had to go through a leadership contest, she's not had to produce a manifesto, she's not had to go through hustings.
All of which is extraordinary.
Yes, and I think she herself was probably preparing for that process. Interestingly, you'll know that we've been through a few leaders recently in Wales. We started with Mark Drakeford. There was a leadership contest then at the beginning of the year. She decided then not to put her name forward, and we had Vaughan Gething and Jeremy Miles battling out. And in the end, neither of those will be First Minister by the end of this year. So we don't know what her ideas for change are. I suppose when she's involved as the leader of Welsh Labour, it makes the opportunity to ask her exactly what will change.
We'll talk to you then. Okay, thank you.
18 minutes to 7, lots of new leadership it seems, and not least talking about the armed forces. The UK has 3 years to get ready for war. New army chief wants to see the front page of the Eye. Britain must prepare for conflicts against an axis of evil as Russia, China, North Korea and Iran work more closely together. General Sir Lee Walker predicts that Russia will seek revenge on the West for supporting Ukraine, whatever the outcome of the war. It doesn't talk about the UK's defence budget. I'm sure comments will be abound on that, but the new Chief of General Staff says threats will converge in 3 years, giving just enough time to build credible forces for us to be able to deter enemies. And then just crossing to the front page of The Guardian, at shocking gap, it says, found in black mothers' NHS care. The birth of babies to black mothers in England are almost twice as likely to be investigated for potential NHS safety failures, in a disparity that has been labelled a national disgrace. More than 2,300 investigations were completed by England's maternity safety watchdog between 2020 and 2023 into cases including the tragic deaths of babies before, during and soon after birth and the deaths of expectant or new mothers. But for every 1,000 deliveries by black women, there were 2.3 investigations compared with 1.3 for white women. This is research exclusively in England done for UK.
70 minutes to 7 men headlined this morning. A soldier has suffered serious injuries after being stabbed while walking down a street in uniform near barracks in Kent. The 24-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
And just 17 minutes to 7, let's turn our attention then to Parliament, because the new government suffering its first Commons rebellion, not a defeat, but a very small rebellion. It's a quite ruthless action as it's been described in response to Keir Starmer. Here's our parliamentary correspondent, Lisa Murray.
With its whopping Commons majority, there was no doubt the government would win one of its first Commons votes.
The ayes were 103, the noes were 363, so the noes have it, unlocked.
But the detail revealed that within a week of the new parliament getting underway, 7 Labour MPs had voted against the government. The rebels were backing a call from the SNP, the Green Party and Plaid Cymru to immediately end the 2-child limit on some benefits. The cap, which was introduced by the Conservatives, doesn't apply to child benefit, but it does stop almost all parents from claiming universal credit or child tax credit for more than 2 children. The SNP's Pete Wishart reckoned its impact was massive.
What this does to our nation is absolutely, utterly appalling. 87,100 children in Scotland are impacted by this cap.
He threw down the gauntlet to newly elected Labour MPs.
So this is their first big test. With this Scottish Labour oppose this cap. We've heard the leader talk passionately about making sure it's done away. You've got to vote tonight to show that.
When it was brought in, the Conservatives argued the cap was only fair, given that families not on benefits had to make tough choices about how many children they could afford. But it's long been opposed by Labour and the Liberal Democrats. One of their new MPs, Josh Babarindi, used his first speech to call for the policy to be dropped.
I sincerely believe that this government should be even more ambitious in leading the fight against poverty by scrapping the 2-child benefit. A compassionate state is by no means a state that makes us soft or weak. In fact, care is power.
The government has set up a task force bringing together experts and ministers to find ways to tackle child poverty. Labour's Zara Sultana welcomed that as far as it went, but was still determined to vote against the government.
The key driver of rising child poverty is the 2-child benefit cap. And the single most effective way of tackling child poverty is immediately lifting 300,000 children out of poverty by scrapping this cruel policy.
Well, after that vote, the government said that the 7 Labour MPs who backed the SNP amendment to scrap the cap would have the whip suspended, removing them from the party in Parliament at least for a few months. The rebellion came at the end of the debate on the King's Speech, which sets out the changes the government wants to make in the next few months, among them a new approach to tackling illegal immigration. Ministers had ditched the last government's plan to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda. Instead, Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to smash the gangs behind the smuggling. But the now shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly reckoned that to sound tough, Labour was now announcing things that already existed.
So they announced the border security command, even though there's already a small boats operation. They announced a returns unit, even though immigration enforcement already does that. What are they going to announce next? What are they going to invent this time around? The RAF?
The Home Secretary Yvette Cooper didn't think the Conservative record was anything to brag about.
They let record numbers of crimes go unsolved, thus the Home Office budget of £5 billion, and yet it spent £700 million sending just 4 volunteers to Rwanda.
She said the Conservatives had trebled net migration and let boat crossings hit a record high. Yvette Cooper stood for the Labour leadership in 2015, a contest that was eventually won by Jeremy Corbyn. From her seat on the government front bench, she couldn't resist poking a little fun at the Tories' upcoming contest.
the bookies. He's not even the leading candidate from Essex.
A reference there to another Tory former Home Secretary, Priti Patel. And just a few hours later, James cleverly confirmed that he would run to be the Conservative leader.
About that bit at roughly 8:15 in the morning yesterday, 9 o'clock, Radio 4 Extra pieces.
It is 12 minutes to essentially turn our attention to space because the European Space Agency has announced plans to expand its operations in the UK. But what does that mean? This is part of the government's ambition to be one of the most innovative space economies in the world. Carol Mundell, Director of Science at the European Space Agency. Good morning. What's been announced?
Good morning, Emma. Yes, so we've been at the Farnborough Air Show this week, and it's really exciting to have Prime Minister Starmer reviewing his ambitions for skills across the UK. And my team and my colleagues, our Director General Joseph Ashbacher, announced a development of the European Centre for Space Applications and Telecommunications, which is just outside Oxford on the Harlow campus. So we have a new strategy for expansion there. And in my directorate, I will expand across the whole of the European Space Agency, so 22 member states, including the UK, which of course is a major player in the European landscape, although the UK was a founding member of ESA nearly 50 years ago. So it's been fantastic to be in the UK, just looking at what we can do to expand the UK's influence and really harness the leadership of the UK universities, UK industry, and that whole ecosystem in collaboration with European Space Agency engineers and technologists and scientists to be world leaders. So it's been an exciting week.
So greater investment, largely of the campus, trying to boost those bonds. But I suppose in terms of for those who know nothing about this, what does that mean would be UK's contribution to space and what we know?
Yeah, so the UK already, as I say, is a founding member of ESA, is one of the 4 big investors. At the Harlow campus, we currently have just over 100 staff there. We're looking to double that by 2030, and what that means, that campus there really focuses on space applications, telecommunications, which is a major growth area, but also the advanced skills. And we're hoping that the UK industrial sector will also then respond in terms of increasing their ambition and their innovation, particularly advanced manufacture, across the UK, so that they're not only bidding in for European contracts through ESA, but they're also running an increased share of global market.
And to put it, I suppose, in terms of what people think of when they think of space, does that mean a greater number of British astronauts directly sort of travel to space?
And it's everything really, and the UK already is hugely successful in our astronaut program. So in 2022, Joseph announced 17 astronauts, so half of those were candidate astronauts. So Rosemary Coogan was the UK candidate astronaut. She graduated from her basic training this year, which is wonderful. John McFall was the first para astronaut, so he's just going through training at the moment. It's feasibility studies to see what is possible for disabled astronauts in space, and maybe the first ever para astronaut when he finishes his basic training and gets an opportunity to fly as a reserve astronaut.
Well, I was going to say, we'll watch this space, but that's a terrible pun. And Carol Mundell, Director of Science at the European Space Agency.
8 minutes to 7 is the time. Angela Rayner, affiliated with Labour, and separately, ASNET, one of those unions, train drivers union, has been meeting officials at the public transport in an effort to bring their 2-year-old to an end and make the end. The General Secretary of ASNET is on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Fill us in. What progress, if any, do you report from the Department of Transport?
Well, the first thing is, anybody meeting at all is a major step forward. We went for a period of time where nobody from the government would talk to us, so we had to bring the former Secretary of State December of 22 and the Roman Ministers in January of 23. The fact that the Labour Party met with us within 7 days of taking power and put a team in place to talk to us, I think is a major step forward and a whole kind of change.
A major step forward that leads, do you believe now, to an end of this dispute?
We've always wanted a resolution to this dispute.
Yeah, but do you think it's got any closer?
I believe it is. I think the whole time to change. Once we get a final offer, you can say it's definitely over. I think the mood music is very much of that they want a resolution, they want it quickly, they want a railway that performs for travelling public, passengers and people working in it. And I'm quite keen to make that
parameters of that? Because the thing that was the sticking point, God, we've talked about this so many times in the program, the business of what, in a sense, the rail delivery would have had in return for extra money for your men. So they wanted all sorts of things, didn't they? You were unwilling to sign up to when it came to changes in working practices. Is it your understanding that those changes are still on the cards, or have you not got into that kind of detail?
I don't think I'm at the same level. I mean, basically, World War I before was our first war on every firm position we've ever had since 1880, which is September, for a 20% pay cut. And also, nobody could explain to us how it would make the railway run better, make it more effective, if you were cutting drivers sick pay or taking their pensions away. So, and there's also things that were red lines that were taken out of the deal that they don't go back in when the deal failed. I was at that time wondering if the previous government ever wanted to drill that.
Right, and you are sure that this government wants to, and are you going to see the Transport Secretary as such?
I'm there again. I mean, I was there very, very busy first week of government, setting the teams up and meeting everybody with the rail. But, I have to just speak this fine. I mean, they were elected on the 4th, they appointed the Secretary on the 5th, they appointed the rail minister on the 9th, and met them on the 10th. And then as soon as they put in the team to meet with us, we met with us in this meeting, first meeting. So I have to say, I feel far more upbeat than I felt.
And are there any strikes in the pipeline?
Not at this moment in time. There's no reason to try for people talking to you. It's when that long period of time when nobody was talking to us at all that we have to keep raising the profile of our problem levels.
A wider thought, we're talking about correspondent earlier about last night. Parliament's the suspension of 6 MPs against the government's business of the two-child cap benefits. And he was saying the problem potentially gets started is going to be discussions outside of Parliament, but among Labour supporters. But what's your view of the suspension of those MPs? Do you think it was the right thing to do? Do you think kind of party discipline is important enough for that, or is the issue one that they ought to have been able to raise and to vote on and further discussions then will be had?
I think the problem for the party is it's new into power. The leader will actually want to establish authority, but at the same time, with such a big majority, you should be able to have those voices in the rural church that say, well, maybe I don't agree with you. The purpose of whipping is to make sure that you win a vote. I think the majority that they've got, I don't think that's the major issue at the moment in time. If you come to the issue itself, the principle they've set an MP on the basis that I actually do believe that the two-child cap is torturous and should be removed.
Do you think it will be eventually?
I think it'll be the intention eventually. I mean, I think the problem any new government you can't do everything overnight. But in this particular case, economically, the previous government was inept. It was 14 years of austerity. It was the highest borrowing government of all time, excluding COVID. That meant highest borrowing of all time. You had all the other governments and policies together. I don't know where that money went. I don't know what they did with it. They didn't invest in the future. They didn't invest in children. They didn't invest in housing. I'm not sure what they did.
But you are, I mean, it sounds to me as if you're being patient with Keir Starmer. You're allowing this to play out in the party. But are you saying that by the end of this Parliament, he must have changed position and that two-child cap should be?
I believe we should. I think there's been the opportunity. I mean, child poverty costs us £36 billion in the UK. Surely guaranteeing that child poverty is worthwhile and will reduce that cost of company.
Mick Whelan, General Secretary for Podcast. Thank you.
It's 3 minutes to 7. Let's get the news and weather from South Wales.
Thank you very much, Emma and Jessica. Good morning to you. Weather remains quite changeable now for the rest of the week, but generally speaking, we'll see quite a bit of sunshine on, and it's going to feel warmer, particularly as we get into the weekend. Of course, England and Wales will feel a lot warmer with warmer nights to come as well. Today, though, a little bit changeable. We're starting off on a fine note, but we will have some weak weather fronts pushing into the Atlantic, and there'll be an increasing chance of rain. So for England, Wales, they were starting off fine, and sunshine over to the Midlands, southern and southeast England. Elsewhere, variable cloud, a little bit of mist and murk around some southern and certainly western coast around the Irish Sea, certainly, and winds will remain light. But the cloud will tend to build through the morning, especially Wales and western England, with patchy rain arriving by around lunchtime, heaviest from South Wales, southwest England, with strengthening southwesterly winds, and it'll stay driest and brightest across eastern England, will speed warms, so temperatures in England and Wales 20 to 25 and 26 degrees. Scotland, Northern Ireland, dry with sunny spells this morning. Again, variable cloud, but the cloud will build up across western Scotland and in towards Northern Ireland as we head into the evening. So patch of rain moving in, the breeze also picking up particularly for Northern Ireland. Now, temperatures across Scotland, Northern Ireland, a little bit low. It's not quite warm in the sunshine, 18 to 21 or 22 degrees sunshine.
On BBC iPlayer.
12 months ago, work breaks down in India. 4 months ago, a woman just vanishes into thin air.
You don't know what's happening here. A strange crime mystery in the Australian Alps.
People keep telling me how easy it is to disappear at home.
More people are missing.
I think it's this town's colour.
Same things okay as well. Big warnings. Pine country.
Hey! Hey, who's out there?
Watch on BBC iPlayer.
In the next hour from this programme, we will be hearing the story of a teenager brought into the UK on stalking in September.
That was very dangerous at the beginning when we just got into the boat. There were so many waves.
You listen to Today on Radio Cinema and Emma. Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Wednesday the 24th. The headlines today. A soldier has been stabbed while walking in uniform near barracks in Kent. Sir Keir Starmer has suspended 7 of his MPs from the Parliamentary Labour Party after facing his first armed rebellion. A public inquiry in New Zealand has found that 200,000 children and vulnerable adults have been abused in state and religious care since the 1950s. BBC News is Matthew Anderson.
A soldier has been seriously injured after being stabbed in broad daylight while walking in uniform near an army barracks in Kent. He was attacked in a street in Chatham yesterday afternoon, with reports suggesting he was stabbed multiple times. The 24-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Aruna Ayandon reports.
In a statement, an army spokesman confirmed that a soldier in his 40s was stabbed near his home in Chatham late yesterday afternoon. He sustained serious injuries. The BBC was told the soldier was wearing his uniform at the time. He was airlifted to hospital. A 24-year-old man was arrested shortly afterwards on suspicion of attempted murder. The attack happened near Brompton Barracks, the headquarters of the Royal School of Military Engineering. Police called in deputies to the scene and investigations are continuing. The army said it was working closely with Kent Police. It has urged anyone who witnessed the attack to come forward and has asked people to respect the privacy of the victim's family.
Sir Keir Starmer will face a grilling in his first Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime, just a day after he suspended 7 Labour MPs for rebelling against the government. They voted for an SNP amendment to scrap the 2-child benefit cap, which prevents almost all parents from claiming universal credit for more than 2 children. The Prime Minister has previously said it's unaffordable to ditch the policy. Many things want to disagree, and maybe will change his position in the coming months. Here's our political correspondent, Nick Urgent.
After less than 3 weeks in Downing Street, this is Sir Keir Starmer's first rebellion. A small revolt, one that's been met with ruthless discipline. The 7 MPs who defied the government and voted to scrap the 2-child benefit cap have been suspended from the party for 6 months. Among them, prominent MPs from the left, including the former Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, and Rebecca Long-Bailey, who challenged Sir Keir for leadership in 2020. Although the Prime Minister has a thumping majority in the Commons, which makes it unlikely he'll lose a vote anytime soon, last night's suspensions are a warning to others that defiance on key issues will not be allowed. There are, however, many other Labour MPs who want the government to remove the 2-child benefit cap. Some are hopeful that change might come down the line.
Nominations open this evening for the Conservative leadership contest. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has become the first MP to officially declare their candidacy to replace Rishi Sunak. The nomination window closes next Monday, and the final winner will be announced on November the 2nd. The Welsh Health Secretary, Eluned Morgan, is expected to be confirmed as the new Welsh Labour leader later today, paving the way for her to become the next First Minister. No other Senate member has put their name forward to contest the role, with nominations due to close at midday. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
With the vast
vast majority of her Labour colleagues in the Senate backing her nomination, and no other candidate looking likely to declare, Eluned Morgan should be confirmed as the new leader of Welsh Labour later today. She put herself forward as the unity candidate, acknowledging the factions which fragmented the Welsh government under Vaughan Gething, and led to his announcement last week that he would stand down. Healing wounds within the party is only part of the challenge ahead, as the current Health Secretary, Eluned Morgan, knows all too well the problems facing the Welsh NHS, which has developed record-long waiting lists and failed multiple performance targets during her time in charge. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing protests from pro-Palestinian demonstrators, Jewish activists, and the families of hostages being held by Hamas as he travels to Washington. Mr. Netanyahu is scheduled to deliver a speech to Congress as he seeks to shore up American support for his military offensive at a time of tension between the two allies. Earlier, hundreds of Jewish protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza were arrested inside the US Capitol. Our North America correspondent Tom Bateman was there.
I'm standing in the rotunda of the House of Representatives office building. There are dozens of protesters and they're being cuffed by the police, taken away, hands behind their backs.
It was several hours before the Capitol Police removed all the demonstrators who were from the group Jewish Voice for Peace. They were among the first to protest against Benjamin Netanyahu's visit. His invite was bipartisan, but initiated by the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, whose party is trying to show unflinching support for Israel. However, potentially dozens of Democratic members of Congress could boycott the speech, angry at Mr. Netanyahu's handling of the war and at levels of US military assistance to Israel, given the huge numbers of Palestinian civilians killed in Gaza. With the limelight in play, President Biden, frequently exasperated at his inability to cajole the Israeli Prime Minister into doing what he wants, has timed a high-profile national TV address about the election for just a few hours after Mr. Netanyahu's speech.
A public inquiry in New Zealand has found that 200,000 children, young people and vulnerable adults have been abused in state and religious care since 1950. It found that those from the indigenous Maori community and people with disabilities were particularly affected. The inquiry spoke to victims of rape, sterilisation and electric shocks. The country's Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, reacted to the findings at a news conference in Wellington.
To the survivors, I want to say thank you for your exceptional strength, your incredible courage, and also your confronting honesty. This is a dark and sorrowful day in New Zealand's history. And as a society and as a state, we should have done better, and I am determined that we will do so.
A plan's been drawn up to open the first National Centre for Writing in Newcastle. It's part of a wider attempt by the charity New Writing North to transform the publishing industry in the UK. It's joined forces with the North East Mayor, Kim McGuinness, and Northumbria University. Together they intend to work with major publishers to try to reduce what they see as London's stranglehold over the book industry. Correspondent Claire Patterson has been looking at the plan.
The aim is simple: to disrupt the current status quo in the publishing industry, opening a new £14 million National Centre for Writing in Baldhead Hall, right in the centre of Newcastle, by mid-2026. Claire Malcolm from New Writing North believes this would fundamentally change the type of book published in Britain.
For so long, London has been like a tap draining everything down a certain drain, and in the North East, we are really ready to step forward with new ideas. We talk a lot in the North East about what the new industrial revolution will be, and for us it's going to be creativity.
£5.5 million has already been pledged from within the region. Major publishers are on board. Hachette UK has already opened an office in Newcastle, and Faber & Faber started a branch of its writing academy last year in the city.
John Mayall, a pioneering figure in the British blues scene, has died at his home in California at the age of 90. In the 1960s, his influential band, the Blues Breakers, helped launch the careers of rock stars including Eric Clapton, John McVie and Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac, and Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones. His 1966 album, Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton, is considered one of the best British blues albums, with tracks such as All Your Love.
politics, what does it also tell us about the substance of the issue? Is the two-child cap going to stay or to go under Labour? Let's talk to our political editor, Chris Mason, who's on the news this morning. That was quite a moment, wasn't it?
It was a moment because it was a decision from the Prime Minister to, in a discretionary way, if not pick a fight, because he would argue that the rebels have picked a fight with him, then certainly to demonstrate a brutal illustration of his power. Now, we should remind ourselves, because the numbers are quite something, this is a party now with 411 MPs. You need to be like a jumbo jet to cart them all around, and you can fit these rebels in the back of a people carrier. So the numerical consequence of this, the Prime Minister, is irrelevant, but the signal it sends is colossal. And the argument that he and his team are making is, look, this is a view that Labour centrally has made throughout the election campaign, this idea that the two-child cap, this benefit cap that stops most parents claiming additional child-related welfare payments if they have more than 2 children, is not something they can afford to scrap. And here are these Labour MPs who were elected on that ticket less than 3 weeks ago. So the argument goes, don't go defying the Prime Minister less than 3 weeks into a Labour government. But we've seen rebels for eons, rebellions for eons amongst those in the sort of left-wing caucus of the Labour Party, the campaign group as they are known. They've happened for years and years and years, almost always without remark. And yet this one, the Islam are deciding, he's going to make it remarkable by his actions.
And does that store up some difficulty for him in the wider party? I'm thinking of people like actually Mick Whelan, who we talked to 20 minutes or so ago, who's on the NEC, he's as a leader, union leader, and he was saying, he wasn't exactly angry about it, but he did suggest mildly that it wasn't quite the right way to go, and that actually, on the substance of it, the two-child cap has itself got to go, and that is widely known, isn't it, in the party?
It is. So here you have a thing that would cost about £2.5 billion to get rid of. It affects about 1.6 million children, and there is an argument that extends well beyond those who rebelled last night because those rebels were told the likely consequences of it, that they would put off quite a few others from doing it. There's plenty within the party who really, really do not like this two-child cap. From the government's perspective, their argument is, look, it is not affordable at the moment. They made this big play around quote-unquote fiscal responsibility being trusted with the country's finances. So in the short term, there doesn't seem any prospect that they will get rid of this. In the medium term, they are hinting that they would like to, if they could. Prime Minister repeatedly made it clear he doesn't have a principled objection to removing the cap. It's, as he sees it, a practical and a financial one. But yeah, deciding to do this, yes, it is that sort of ruthless exhibition of power. Yes, it puts down a marker which can just tempt the potential rebels to think twice in the coming months. But it does stoke as well an argument within the party, particularly on the left, and then on the left beyond the party, around this whole issue. And who knows where that leads months, maybe years down the track, when the novelty and honeymoon period of a new government, even one with a huge majority, has worn off.
Chris Mason, thank you.
12 minutes past 7. The radical preacher Anjem Choudary has been found guilty of directing a group banned under UK terror laws and encouraging support for it online. He faces life in prison after he was convicted yesterday after taking a caretaker role in the Islamist group Al-Muhajirun. He was previously jailed in 2016 for encouraging support for the Islamic State group and then released in 2018. But should he have been, and upon release, should the terms have been different? Jonathan Hall, KC government advisor with an independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, is with us. Good morning. He was caught again after an extensive undercover operation, but what do you think this story should tell us about the law?
I don't think this is really a story about the law, it's really a story about the evidence. I think it shows that the authorities really threw the kitchen sink at Anjem Choudary. You've got to go back to 2005, 7/7 happened, attacks on the underground. Tony Blair's government passed the Terrorism Act 2006, and they really tried to get to grips with the idea of encouragement. Anjem Choudary was the chief encourager, and he did this through Al-Muhajirun. And he hasn't changed his spots. I mean, that's what the jury has found. Even though he went to prison, he gave evidence evidence that he was in the separation centre, so he was really held in the greatest security possible. He came out on very, very strong licence conditions, but he still harboured and in fact, I'm sure found, carried out playing his leadership role. So it's really a story about one individual, about the importance of encouragement, and the fact that here we know the authorities really wanted to get him. And we know that because in evidence was a MI5 bug. It's quite rare that intelligence type stuff will come in, but the authorities really wanted to get him.
So no room for improvement there. You know, you see people talking and being very concerned about someone's been in prison, they've come out, they've got strict licence conditions, and they've been able to do this in the meantime. What about the calls for, and I recognise this is not the law, but not being able to use the internet?
Well, there's only so much you can do, I suppose. I mean, you could say, well, anyone who's committed to terrorism should be in prison for life, and they should never be allowed to use the internet for life. Now, probably most people, when they come out of prison, even terrorists, having been on licence, having all sorts of conditions that they have to comply with, will start to move away. Even Al-Muhajiroon, there's a good book which shows that many people did eventually, they grew up, they got married, they moved away from it. Anjem Choudary may be one of those quite unique people who just refuse to move on. And the offences being convicted of is incredibly rare. I mean, I'm only aware of one more person in British history who's been convicted of this offence in Great Britain, Ramzi Mahmoud, who was convicted in 2008 of directing Al-Qaeda. So it's a really rare charge, I think, for quite a rare individual.
But I suppose, again, just to understand, you don't think there was anything that could have been done in that interim period? Because what we can't know, or maybe we can know, please share, is what harm may have been caused by his actions in those intervening years. That's the concern, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can tell what sort of harm was feared, because this was a massive international operation. The Canadians, the US were involved. The evidence I understand was that he felt quite restricted by what he could do in the UK, but he was still able to try and reach into New York, which explains the presence of the Americans. The FBI were monitoring the chat group that he was involved in. I'm afraid he's an individual who just wanted to carry on doing what he was doing. And this is what I'm thinking about the separation centre, which is quite interesting. These sorts of individuals, in the past, they would carry on their career in prison because they had a captive audience, people who were very willing to listen to the message. Separation centres were brought in, and he said that he was actually in one of them, just to keep them away from the general population. Because it's obviously quite important that if someone is a hardcore radicaliser, you don't just feed them more people to radicalise when they've gone through the prison gate.
Yes, but and we've heard those stories when we have been able to get reports or access to them. We have a new government. From your position as an independent reviewer of the legislation and anything around this, is there something that you think that should be top of the in tray?
Not at the moment. I mean, terrorism is awful and the effects are dreadful. We haven't had a large number of terrorist murders. There's only been 2 since 2021. I mean, they're always dreadful. The drumbeat hasn't been quite as high in terms of actual completed. I'm worried, and I mean, the government knows about this, about the number of children who keep on getting arrested for terrorism offences because of the internet. And I'm really worried about getting to grips with the internet. First of all, I'm going to be really realistic about what we can do about the internet. There is an Online Safety Act, there is Ofcom, but the levers that are available to government police are quite limited. So I do think that we need to really test the system. It's not as easy as simply saying, well, there's some bad material on the internet, let's take it down. We don't have those levers. So the internet is really where it's at, but in terms of actual terrorism legislation at the moment, I'm not making any sort of profound suggestions.
But with the Online Safety Act, I suppose that's what a lot has been put.
A lot has been put, but I think we have to take a real sort of gulp of cold water here. Ofcom, which is a regulator, has got a massive job to do. It's got to deal with child sex abuse, fraud, all of these things. Terrorism is just one of many, many things. And the people who are really responsible for the material based overseas, probably in America, with First Amendment rights, which mean they feel very strongly about being told by other countries to remove material. It's going to be a very long journey.
Do you think that Ofcom can do it?
I think Ofcom are doing a really fantastic job, but I'm really sceptical about the range of things they've got to do, and so I'm just talking about realism, and it remains to be seen.
Jonathan Hall, government advisor there to about the independent review, I should say, of terrorism legislation.
Past 7, record-breaking passenger numbers at Heathrow, and yet the airport soon met it as well, choosing rival hubs around Europe on it further afield. Again, to Sean.
Thanks, Justin. Nearly 40 million passengers passing through there in the first half of the year, but concerns for the company about how competitive the airport is with the rest of the world. Income for the airport falling compared to last year, although profits were up. Heathrow's chief executive is Thomas Volk. morning to you.
Good morning, John.
I want to get on to a few of the reasons that income might have fallen in a moment, but just first up, you say in your results this morning that you're conducting this internal review to enable recommendations to create capacity. When will we get a decision from you about whether you want to build a third runway?
Well, I think two things, or two answers there. One, when we talk expansion at Heathrow, we are looking initially at what can we do with our two runways. I think that is actually the most urgent question. How can we create capacity within the infrastructure we have? Parallel to that, we're then conducting a review of further long-term expansion, including the third runway, and determining how that can look. We will decide on that when we have a sufficient base for that, and that is still going to take months.
But how long will it take?
To be honest, we don't know that yet, because it is really complicated and it is a big question, and we need to make sure that we have all of our stakeholders along, including government and society around us.
Well, the government hinting it'll be open-minded when it comes to a third runway. I mean, we hear it wants to crack on and get building. Shouldn't you be making a decision much sooner rather than later?
We will make a decision as fast as we can. This is an enormous project, and it has to be given the due time to make the right decision. And we are very positive to work with the government on growth and expansion at Heathrow to the benefit of the UK economy.
Just wondered about what you're seeing this summer. I know there's been record passengers in the first half of the year, but we've just heard from Ryanair this week, demand for flights being weaker than forecast. Are you seeing the same?
Not really. We are seeing continued strong demand also into for the rest of the year.
Okay, strong demand for the rest of the year. Amidst all of that, when passengers are going through Heathrow, they may well see cheaper tickets on the horizon after the Civil Aviation Authority said you will need to cut what you charge airlines to land at Heathrow. Is that good news for passengers?
I think any competitive ticket is good news for consumers and passengers. The charges that we charge have a very limited effect on the ticket prices. They are determined by demand rather than cost. So I don't think that is the big factor. But I think anything that democratizes travel is a great thing.
And so the consequences of that decision by the regulator to reduce what you can charge, are you concerned about it, or actually overall is that just a good decision for all concerned?
No, I think it's not the right decision, because I think we have a regulation and we need to follow the regulation. The regulation is there to ensure that we have the right level of funds to invest in the future. And given the enormous losses we've been through COVID, that's not where we are yet. So I think we need to talk about the future and the value of Heathrow rather than just the price here now.
Thomas Volpe, Chief Executive of Heathrow. Thank you.
Sean, thank you. 22 minutes past 7. Britain's most decorated female Olympian, the dressage competitor Charlotte Dujardin, is in deep trouble this morning over suggestions that she beat her horse excessively with a whip. She's already out of the Olympics. She's now been suspended by the governing body of equestrian sport in the UK. Madeline Hall used to cover dressage, of course, in our magazine that's on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The video will shock people. I mean, is it common in dressage to whip horses as you're in practice with them?
Well, the situation is that whips are used in all equestrian sporting disciplines, and if you look at horse racing, for example, then you can see quite a lot of use of whip, especially as jockeys come to the finishing line. Now, that kind of use of the whip wouldn't be acceptable in any of the Olympic disciplines. In dressage, they use a long whip called a schooling whip, and it's effectively used to encourage the horse to use its back end where the power comes from. Because it's, as you know, it's a big animal. They're also very sensitive. So generally, the whip's used to encourage the horse to use more impulsion from behind, or perhaps to lift its legs a bit higher. Generally, you can't use the whip too harshly because horses are very sensitive and they'll react badly, or they'll overreact. So generally, in dressage, I'd say it's used as a training aid and quite cautiously.
Yeah, and I don't think you've seen the video, have you?
I haven't.
No. So it's difficult to make a judgment about whether it was overuse or not. But you're saying some use would be normal. Overuse would be what? I mean, if people are wanting to make a judgment about what is normally acceptable in dressage, what should they be looking at?
Well, I mean, I think that is down to the governing bodies. I mean, overuse. I've never seen that in warm-up arenas or in competitions. I've never seen what I would have thought would be overuse of the whip.
In fact, people very rarely use the whips in competitions. You're not allowed to use the whips. Championships and beyond, people aren't using whips at all because it's meant to be a training aid. You know, at that level, you're not meant to use the whip. So without having seen the video, I don't know what Charlotte was trying to achieve, but she herself has said that it's out of character and she's deeply ashamed, and obviously now she's been suspended. But I do think the timing of this video appearing at the FEI 3 days before the opening of the Olympics does smell to me of sabotage. It doesn't sound very, very fair, and I don't think the FEI should have responded quite like it has. Really,
yeah, that's interesting. So you think this feels to you, will it feel to wider people in the sport like a deliberate attempt to damage her career?
Yes, Charlotte's the top gold medal rider. She's the star of the scene. And somebody has produced this video, which apparently was taken years ago, and has produced it, given to the FEI. I guess they felt they had no choice but to do something, but they could have sat on it till after the Olympics. I mean, it's apparently, as far as I can make out from the internet, which as you know is not a reliable source of information necessarily, it's between 2 and 4 years old.
Yeah, but presumably as soon as they had the video, they had to act.
Yes, but I'm saying that it's being sent. Yes, but as I understand it, it's sent by a Dutch lawyer 3 days before the opening of the Olympics. It's, to me, a bit suspect.
Do you have a sense now of what happens to Charlotte and Jordan? I mean, because they will look at this, they'll look at the video, presumably.